Hey, this is Cave Cat once more, bringing to you another video talking about something television related. You may recall back in episode 6 of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews, I did a review of the Christian animated series VeggieTales. Also, during that review, I talked about how its spin off, VeggieTales in the House, as well as VeggieTales in the City, failed to actually live up to capturing the style of the original VeggieTales series. So, for today's video, I'm going to talk about that here as well. To start things off, back in 2002, when Big Idea's first theatrical feature-length film, Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, was released, the film unfortunately ended up being a box office bomb, and it ended up costing Big Idea a lot of money, to the point that the company ended up having to file for bankruptcy. Fortunately, a saving grace came to them in the form of them being picked up by Classic Media. You know, the company that owned other properties, ranging from the UPA cartoon shorts, a lot of the J. War and Total television shows, the Golden Book Video Library, Harvey Comics, and several others. Once that happened, VeggieTales was able to get a new start with Classic Media, and they ended up releasing a lot of good episodes in the post-Jonah era, like The Ballad of Little Joe, An Easter Carol, A Snoodle's Tale, Sumo the Opera, Duke and the Great Pie War, Minnesota Cuke and the Search for Samson's Hairbrush, Lord of the Beans, Sherlock Holmes and the Golden Ruler, Larry Boy and the Bad Apple, Gideon Tuba Warrior, and several others. However, near the end of the 2000s, despite the comeback that Big Idea made after being bought out by Classic Media, things began to take a dive once again for the VeggieTales series once they released their second theatrical animated feature, The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, a VeggieTales movie. Of course, that film ended up being an even bigger box office bomb than Jonah ever did. To tell you the truth, I actually like the Pirates film, so don't judge me about that. But what makes this even more upsetting was the fact that originally, Big Idea's second theatrical film was going to be a film called The Bob and Larry Movie, which would have told the story of how Bob and Larry first met and became friends, as well as what made them decide to teach children about God's morals and values. But unfortunately, that idea ended up getting scrapped thanks to Big Idea filing for bankruptcy after the box office failure of Jonah. Not only that, but come the 2010s era, Big Idea also ended up making some rather questionable decisions, starting with the release of Pistachio, the Little Boy Who Wouldn't, and especially the absolutely abysmal Sweet Pea Beauty. Once that happened, Big Idea also ended up making even more awful episodes, like Twas the Night Before Easter, Princess and the Pop Star, The Penniless Princess, and several others. Then it ended up becoming even more egregious when back in 2012, DreamWorks Animation bought out Classic Media, which owned Big Idea, and renamed it to DreamWorks Classics. From what I heard, this business decision was met with mixed reactions. A lot of people were afraid that Big Idea would end up falling victim to the various pitfalls that DreamWorks Animation is known for, such as using celebrity voice actors and making use of gross humor, while others were hopeful that DreamWorks would try to stay true to the Christian aspect of VeggieTales, reminiscent of when they made the Prince of Egypt and Joseph King of Dreams. A couple of years after that, Big Idea and DreamWorks announced that they were making a brand new VeggieTales series in association with Netflix. Once this announcement was made, this also ended up worrying a lot of people, especially after the news that the characters that we all know and love were going to be redesigned for the new series, which would become known as VeggieTales in the House. And once the redesigns for the characters were revealed, to say that a lot of people were upset and put off by how the characters that they were familiar with looked would be an understatement. But even in spite of this, some people did decide to reserve judgment until the show would actually premiere to see if the new series would actually capture the style of the original VeggieTales series or not. So now the question is, did this show actually do a good job of capturing the spirit of VeggieTales? Well, yes and no, but more likely no in this case. For starters, while the characters still retain their characterizations from the original series, however, they've been flanderized so that the characterizations have been taken up to 11 far too much. For example, Bob is way more uptight and easily annoyed than he is in the original series, and Larry, while he wasn't exactly the brightest guy around in the original series, has been made into an idiot in this series. It's kind of similar to what happened with Socrates in the third season of Adventures from the Book of Virtues, when the producers had the bright idea of taking Soc's clumsiness and ignorance and really stretching it out far too much. But I'll get more into that once I get to a future video to celebrate the show's 30th anniversary. And on the subject of the characters, while most of the original characters from the original series have been included in VeggieTales in the House, there was actually one character who was going to be included in the series, but it ended up getting cut altogether because of some controversies. That would be none other than Mr. Nezer. The reason for this was because his voice was provided by Phil Vischer doing an imitation of Ken Page's portrayal of Oogie Boogie from The Nightmare Before Christmas. And apparently, DreamWorks had a strict vendetta against a black character being voiced by a non black actor. So it's because of this that the producers ended up replacing Mr. Nezer with a similar character, which would be Ikebeezer. I talked about this before in my video talking about why I think that the Garbage Pail Kids cartoon reboot will be successful, but apparently a lot of people expressed their outrage over the fact that Mr. Nezer was replaced with Ikebeezer just because DreamWorks thought that Mr. Nezer supposedly being a black character being voiced by a non-black actor in the original VeggieTales series was racist. I mean, it's one thing to remove some characters that did not appear very often, but it's another to completely remove a character that's been around for a long time and replace it with a similar looking character that just completely lacks the charm of the original character. But even in spite of this, at least Mr. Nezer did get brought back when Big Idea made the VeggieTales show, even though he was voiced by a different actor, due to Phil Vischer no longer being comfortable with voicing the character. But speaking of characters that have been removed, the same thing also happened to characters that didn't appear often but were a prevalent part of the VeggieTales series, such as the Scallion, Scooter Carrot, Grandpa George, Annie Youngin, Percy P., Apollo Gord, Charlie Pincher, Oscar Gordon, and even Khalil the Caterpillar for unknown reasons. Maybe the people at DreamWorks Animation figured that it would be very hard to have so many characters in VeggieTales for them to try and follow in a brand new environment, i.e., having them interact with Bob and Larry and everyone else while in the titular house that all of the characters live in. But as mentioned before regarding the whole Mr. Nezer debacle, and these characters like the Scallion, Scooter, and even Goliath and Khalil got brought back in the VeggieTales show, even if Scooter and Khalil ended up getting voiced by different actors. Though, from what I heard, back when Big Idea made those VeggieTales super comics, which were basically comic retellings of previous VeggieTales episodes, they actually used the In the House and the City designs, and much like with VeggieTales in the House and VeggieTales in the City, these comics weren't very well received either, because a lot of people complained about how the classic VeggieTales episodes were ruined by these redesigns. And yes, I could definitely see why a lot of people say that sometimes it's best to just leave well enough alone. And even though a lot of the minor characters from the original VeggieTales series didn't get to appear in VeggieTales in the House or VeggieTales in the City, the new characters that were created specifically for the show, such as Bacon Bill, Tina Celerina, Bo Rockley, Gary Garlic, Cauliflower, Granny Asparagus, and even new villains like Motato, Apricot, and Yambot, just didn't have the charm as the characters that did not appear in the Netflix version of VeggieTales, with a lot of people finding them to be either dull or really annoying, especially in the case of Bacon Bill or even Ikebeezer. It's like if Disney adapted Winnie the Pooh, but decided to remove most of the characters that did appear in the original books and replace them with substitute characters that a lot of people would end up boycotting. In fact, that's almost what happened when Disney made Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, where they replaced Piglet with Gopher. But thankfully, Disney decided to include Piglet, starting with the next Pooh short, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. And despite the fact that Gopher was a character that never appeared in the original Winnie the Pooh stories, at least he was still a prevalent part of the Pooh franchise, even appearing in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and in several of the animated specials that followed the series, up until he stopped appearing in future Pooh material, aside from the Kingdom Hearts games. The same thing also applies here in regards to the VeggieTales franchise, but much like Gopher, one character from VeggieTales in the House and VeggieTales in the City did end up getting brought over to the VeggieTales show, which would be Cauliflower. Now, I need to make one thing really clear here. The point of Callie's character is that she is an expert on insects and makes a hobby out of observing them, as seen in her debut episode. But when she was brought over into the VeggieTales show, that aspect of her character seemed to be abandoned, as well as how her design from In the House in the City really made her stick out like a sore thumb among the original VeggieTales characters, since the VeggieTales show actually returned to the original character designs. Yes, the VeggieTales show was able to make up for a lot of the mistakes that VeggieTales in the House and VeggieTales in the City made, and that was definitely a refreshing change of pace with the VeggieTales franchise. However, despite this, even the VeggieTales show wasn't safe from getting quite a bit of flack from a lot of lifelong fans over even the smallest things, like the fact that Mr. Nezer, despite returning to the main cast, was no longer voiced by Phil Vischer, or the fact that the Emperor of Envy, a character appearing in the Larry Boy book Larry Boy and the Emperor of Envy, had a much different character design than how he appeared in the original book when he finally appeared in person in a Larry Boy focused episode. In conclusion, I'm well aware of how bad VeggieTales in the House, as well as its spin off VeggieTales in the City, are, but even in spite of how bad both shows are, I'll watch them on some occasions, just as a guilty pleasure. And I'm sure that there are also people that genuinely enjoy the show for what it is, or as a guilty pleasure, like me. But other than that, even I cannot deny that the show definitely has its flaws. And of course, I did mention before about the news of Phil Vischer, Mike Naraki, Lisa Fisher, and Kurt Heineke getting fired from Big Idea in mid 2021, which resulted in the VeggieTales show getting the axe way too soon. Not to mention the Larry Boy movie still going through a lot of problems during production, especially regarding the fact that Kingstone Studios is handling production, but deciding to use AI for the animation process, which a lot of people, myself included, saw as a huge red flag. In fact, there's actually a fan movement where the lifelong fans of VeggieTales are working hard to try and make their own Larry Boy movie that would be tons better than the one that Kingstone Studios is working on. I mean, sure, VeggieTales is all but done now, after the disastrous outcome of VeggieTales in the House and VeggieTales in the City, and the wasted potential of the VeggieTales show. But if Phil and the other alumni of Big Idea hadn't gotten fired from their own studio, no thanks to Universal, then I'm sure that they would have been there to oversee production on the Larry Boy movie, and they definitely would have vetoed the use of AI for the animation process. The people at Universal and especially DreamWorks Animation really need to realize that VeggieTales just isn't VeggieTales without Phil and Mike at the helm. And there you have it. Those are the reasons why I think that VeggieTales in the House did not live up to the expectations that were set upon it. As mentioned before, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell for more videos from me. Until next time, see you in the future!